Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Are the team's two stars, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, still worth going all in for? That's next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. Andy, no matter how or where you get your podcasts, you can always find us for free, never behind a paywall. Somebody asked us, I should say, earlier in the why do we tell people that? It's so they know that it's always free and never behind a paywall. That's why we tell people, because not everything is free and not behind a paywall, but this is. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to see the show, to participate in the Locked On Lakers YouTube community, which is growing and growing and growing. Lots of comments on every post, people interacting with each other. We really appreciate it. We try to use as much of that as possible on the shows whenever we can. Leave us questions, leave us comments specifically to us, and things like that. We will definitely try to weave those in. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. On Monday's show, we put a question out, Andy, asking whether or not
Tuesday's show.
I'm sorry, Tuesday show. Right. Today is Wednesday show. Tuesday show. We put out a question asking whether or not LeBron James and Anthony Davis are still good enough, still consistently excellent enough to be to build around. Put a poll up there on Camp Brothers at Twitter. Is LeBron James clearly a top 5 player? Is Anthony Davis clearly a top 10 player? Interesting results to that poll, which we'll get to. But first, a little bit of news. The cavalry is coming.
It was announced Tuesday that Thomas Bryant, Dennis Schroder, and Kendrick Nunn participated in a South Bay Lakers practice, the G League team. They have since been recalled back to the big club. But
lest you think it was a permanent demotion.
Right. But given that the Lakers did not practice Monday or Tuesday, they're going to start resuming practice on Wednesday. This was significant because for Schroder and Bryant, who have not played this season, you want to give them, or barely this season, I can't remember with
Bryant's played a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit, but for all intents and purposes has not. You want to give those guys as much replication of actual practice in terms of their conditioning, in terms of their timing, everything like that. And then honestly, with Kendrick Nunn, it's about trying to get his proverbial bleep together, because he just has been unplayable and he's just struggled in ways that really make Schroder coming back notable, because the Lakers could use that guard play and some of Schroder's specific skill set, but also Schroder's return could very well mean Kendrick Nunn back out of the rotation. At the very least, what it means is that Kendrick Nunn is on very limited opportunities. He is on borrowed time to stay in the rotation.
Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, you were correct. Neither one. I thought they'd played at the beginning of the year, or very, very early. You're right. Neither one of us played. It is. Let's talk about the guys who are coming back first, because so much was made, and we spent a lot of time on. You can go back and listen to, I guess, a longer version of this conversation on Tuesday's show. So much is made of Mark Stein's reporting on his Substack. The Lakers want to see what things look like with Schroder and Bryant back in the lineup before they make any big deals. There's a natural tendency to overreact to everything, but setting aside the wisdom of do we really need to see what it looks like, and that whole debate, like, the Lakers are short on competent players, on players that are average to above average NBA players. And I don't know if Thomas Bryant was kind of all over the place in the preseason, had some good moments, had some bad moments, certainly provided an energy to the front court, and certainly on paper profiles as somebody who can help them at the center rotation. But right now he helps because at worst he ought to be a playable body, and they don't have anyone, because Damian Jones really hasn't been good at all. They don't have anyone that they can play in that position to give Darvin Ham choices. And again, you can debate what Dennis Schroder is, but he should be someone who can help them create offense and generate scoring opportunities. And that is still a major problem for this team. And so, low bar to clear, but just to have playable guys in the rotation could make a significant difference to what it looks like going forward.
Right. And what it looks like going forward is ultimately going to give the front office, whether you agree with this methodology or not, and for what it's worth, I think there is a real logic to it, but it's going to give them the information they need for when they decide whether or not this team has a foundation that if you make a move, it's worth it. And like we talked about before, Brian, if the baseline for making a move is becoming a front-running contender, then they're doing this wrong, because unless they're somehow going to turn Russ and the rest of this team into like Giannis and Steph and Jokic, that deal doesn't exist. But if your baseline is, which I think would be reasonable and sensible, become a legitimately competitive team, a team that, assuming you can dig yourself out of a 7 games below 500 hole and can get yourself playing competitive again, maybe you get yourself in the playoff mix, hope a few things break right for you, and you live with being competitive and entertaining. And that is a reasonable baseline to search for, but you need to see everybody that you have in order to figure out just how much ground you can make up between where they are now and what you want to be after a trade. Otherwise, you are just throwing away assets for the sake of either pleasing LeBron, pleasing Anthony Davis, pleasing Clutch, pleasing the media, pleasing fans momentarily.
Yes.
But in the end, you're not going to end up pleasing anybody.
No, because if you keep losing, everybody's still going to be upset. Nobody's going to be, well, you made a big trade. I want to come back to that, later in the show when we get into this question of AD and LeBron, this idea of, getting into the playoffs and giving yourself a shot, because I think it's relevant. Saw a great comment on the YouTube page about that. The third part of these guys coming back, that you mentioned, is that when you are able to when you have more playable players, it removes people from your rotation. It means you either can, limit the minutes of a guy like Pat Beverly to the 20 minutes a night, 20 to 24 that he probably should be playing. And it takes a guy like Nunn off the floor. And it's crazy to me that he's in that category of guys, like that we're in a place right now where Kendrick Nunn is practicing with the G League team to try to find some kind of rhythm is kind of mind-boggling. I guess maybe I should have seen this coming, just in the sense of underestimating how hard it is to miss an entire season,
particularly for an inexperienced player.
Right. Ben Simmons struggling in Brooklyn took Jamal Murray a solid 10 games to kind of really start to get his feet
look
up.
at what Klay Thompson's going through, and he was part of a team that won a championship, and Klay played the most minutes, I believe, in the finals of anybody on that team. And Klay has been very outwardly going through struggles, trying to get himself back to, maybe not peak Klay Thompson form pre-injury, but something he finds acceptable.
Right. It's just, so in that sense, I may have underestimated, but it is still crazy to me that he is in that category, because I had such incredible, I hope it works. It's better for the Lakers, but also just on a sort of human level to see a guy miss a season and then struggle so badly going into a free agent year, regardless of whether or not he stays here or goes somewhere else, whatever. Like, these are people. And, this is a young guy at a kind of a crossroads moment of his career. And God, I hope it gets better.
Interesting question though, Brian. When Schroder gets back, Thomas Bryant gets back, you have more options, and Darvin Ham can think about some of the guys he's been playing and who he might not play. What becomes of Max Christie? Because he ended up getting minutes over the last 4 or 5 games, basically the Matt Ryan minutes, but probably to some degree some Kendrick Nunn minutes as well. He's actually played pretty
Tender
well.
gun minutes, probably, when you start the ripple effect, a little bit of JTA time, like, a lot of people are sitting because Max Christie is playing 20 minutes a night. It's worth talking about. We'll do it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want, from a community of local hosts across the US, the UK, Canada, and coming soon to Australia. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget. Book an SUV or minivan for a family road trip, a pickup truck for some bulky errands, even test drive that new electric car you've always had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. You can also find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget, or you just need to get from A to B. Sometimes you just got to drive to a different place. Many Turo hosts, they can even deliver your car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Turo.com.
What country was that, Andy?
Australia.
Very good. I want to tell you about something else, something you can eat, Andy, something that is delicious, something that is nutritious. They are Built Bars, and they are specifically Built Bars' new reimagined flavors: cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, coconut brownie topper, white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on a granola bar, but it's so much more filling, so much tastier. And like this whole candy cane thing, like we're getting into that. People have skipped over Thanksgiving entirely, but that's fine because candy cane brownie is so delicious and it's a puff, and Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud, and it takes you straight to Christmas, and that's where we are. So this is what you want. It's 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low in sugar and calories, only 130 of them. So go try this stuff. You go get 15% off your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15 at built.com. Again, you get 15% off your order by going and using the code LOCKEDON15 at built.com. So we'll get to these poll results around LeBron and AD because, you want to talk about things that are central to the question of whether or not the Lakers ought to be making big moves to try to rescue this season. How good is Anthony Davis? How good is LeBron? That's it. That is the nut of the whole thing. But let's talk about Max Christie real quick, because you're right. When Schroder comes back, that theoretically eats into some time. If you're going to play Thomas Bryant and go bigger, that bumps people down a little bit in the rotation, theoretically eats into some of Christie's time. That said, I am not 100% convinced that Max Christie is not going to keep playing, because he's kind of just feeling like, after a very raggedy preseason, I got the impression it was pretty clear Darvin Ham putting him out on the floor as a break glass in case of emergency. Like, someone around here needs to at least try to play defense. And Christie profiles that way. He had an interesting box score the other night when the Lakers won. He had no points, no assists. I think he took one shot. He had 9 rebounds. But there's all kinds of little stuff, and he was a plus on the floor. So it's like he is. I'm not saying he's a star. But he is playable, which, again, watching the preseason or just saying you have a 19-year-old second-round pick, do you expect to be able to play him? The answer is no, and not on the Lakers, not on on any team. You don't expect 19-year-old second-round pick.
Not unless you're rebuilding.
Right. But like, even then, you're doing it with the idea that this guy's probably not playable. We just don't care. The Lakers theoretically care who is playable and who isn't. And Christie has been a nice little surprise here. And as long as they don't overload him or expect too much, the shot's been okay. He's hit a couple threes. He's, I think a smart player, makes the right pass. And interestingly enough, I think is not trying to do too much, which is usually what happens to younger players, and certainly was, I think, happening to him in the preseason.
Yeah, if anything, he's actually gone the inverse of what most young players try to do, which is put up as many shots as they can and try to impress with their scoring totals. He's really been making his impact defensively and on the glass. And I was looking up some of his numbers in November, and obviously this is small sample size theater, but I was just curious to see how some of these came out. His defensive ranking is the best among any rotation player in November other than Patrick Beverley. And he's got a negative net rating, but so does every rotation regular.
Right.
Again, except Beverly. Like Patrick Beverly, by the way.
The Lakers have a net negative rating and everything. So
yeah, say what you will, by the way, too, about Patrick Beverly. And we've talked a lot about how defensively he's been solid, if not a lockdown guy, but offensively, he's become a problem. He is a plus minus god and a net rating god, advanced numbers god on this team. But Christie's negative net rating is middle of the pack among rotation players. He has the third best plus minus in November behind Beverly, who has the only positive, and then Lonnie Walker. He has the best overall rebounding percentage and defensive rebounding percentage among regulars in November, other than LeBron and AD. And, like some of the other advanced numbers, like opponent's second chance points, opponent points off turnovers, he's towards the top of the team. Yeah. So he's doing the things that you expect to come later for a young player trying to impress. But in the meantime, like you mentioned, Brian, the 3-point shot, he's shooting 50% over his last 4 games. And, it's really low volume, but he was a wreck shooting in the preseason. So it's a positive trend.
Yeah, and it's one of these things. Like the point isn't like the numbers, it's too small a sample size. Numbers can disguise a lot of things. But the point is he's clearly he's not doing damage when he's out there in a bad way. He's not hurting them. His presence on the floor is not hurting them. And that's a lot to say for, again, 19-year-old second-round pick. So good for him. He's shooting the ball pretty well when he decides to do it, not overshooting it and playing defense. And by the way, the Lakers drafted him as somebody they hoped would be able to shoot.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's
play defense. So,
what I also like about him too, he does not play scared at all.
No.
He looks absolutely confident when he's out there. He looks like a kid who thinks that he belongs. And I think he's also starting to recognize as he's out there, the size that I have, the athleticism I have, the length. I may not know everything about playing at this level, but I do know how to use it. And you know what?
That. Yeah,
it's actually pretty good.
So let's turn our attention to this poll. And there's a lot to unpack here.
2 polls.
And, 2 polls. Poll I. There's a lot to unpack here, and I don't know. We can carry some of this conversation into Thursday too. So here's the question that was asked. Do you consider LeBron clearly a top 5 player in the NBA? Do you consider Anthony Davis clearly a top 10 player? 18.5% said yes to both. 17.5% said yes to LeBron and no to AD. 12.5% said no to LeBron, not a top 5 player, but yes, Anthony Davis clearly a top 10 guy. And maybe it's a sign of the times, maybe it is just a sign of frustration, or maybe it is a sign of reality. 51.5% say no to both. Both LeBron and both AD and AD are not, top 5, then top 10 players.
Yeah, and then that was the Twitter results, but I actually put a poll out to our YouTube community, which people, subscribers to the page and stuff like that. You can find polls like that we put out there. Same exact question. You consider LeBron clearly a top 5 player in the NBA, AD clearly top 10. And among you all, our community, 23% said yes to both. 21% said yes, LeBron, no to AD. 10% said no to LeBron, yes to AD. 47% no to both.
No. Yeah. So I mean, very similar results. We just got through polling average season for the midterm elections. I think if I've learned anything, I've learned that the polling experts would say that those are pretty similar results, and
not gerrymandered either.
No. I don't know how you gerrymander a poll, but that's okay.
I went to 2 different places. I tried to get as wide a consensus as possible, as opposed to trying to narrow it to results that I wanted.
We only have access to 2 spots. That's all we got. And I suspect some people probably answer on both, but whatever. The point being, pretty similar results. Were you surprised at any of those numbers? Before we get into whether or not we agree, I'm interested in the response first.
I was a little bit surprised with about 50% cumulatively between both polls said no to both guys. Even recognizing how this season has gone, how people, including us, can be prisoners of the moment, and how the last few years have just gotten increasingly more frustrating and more incompetent at times seemingly more hopeless. Given also, though, how much we've heard both from our Locked On Lakers community, but also from people on Twitter at Cam Brothers, the desire to make a deal, I was surprised that it came out to that many people, I guess, wanting a deal, but also expressing that type of doubt in both LeBron and AD, which, it should be noted, saying that you don't think LeBron is definitively top 5 anymore, AD definitively top 10, is not the same thing as saying both guys are bad. And I don't think anybody answering this poll would think that. But there's a difference.
There's a long way between like 7 and trash.
Right. But I was going to say the difference in thinking LeBron is clearly top 5, AD is clearly top 10, and thinking LeBron's maybe now around 7 to 9, AD's 11 to 15. Those are still really great players. But as far as your foundation goes, it's a different deal. That's a really different deal.
So the next question becomes, is the community correct? And that is the question I want to ask next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all covered at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which I assume that you do because you're here with us right now, you can find those at BetOnline as well. All the content you possibly need, always the fastest, easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Okay, so I think the crux of this question is two things. And for me, it really is. It's the word clearly, and then it's a consideration of everything that goes into being a play, like, a player of that caliber, including, can I rely on you to be there, to be on the floor? Because, LeBron, for example, the numbers aren't what they were last year. But if you kind of divorce yourself from like the concern of, is LeBron still LeBron? Is he still the guy who was an MVP candidate before he got hurt last year if the team was better? And just kind of look at the numbers. The numbers still, in a vacuum, the numbers are still really good NBA numbers. They're just not good for LeBron. But is he there all the time? Like,
I don't agree that the numbers, if you look at LeBron, like among the top 20 scorers, which LeBron, as of this recording, is 14th at just under 25 points per game, his points come starkly more inefficiently than just about everybody else in the top 20. So I think you have to.
But I'm just saying, he's averaging 25, 9, and 7. Like that in a vacuum.
Right. But how you get your 25 points matters.
Okay. But the 9 and the 7 matter too. So all I'm saying is, in a vacuum, LeBron is still a very, he's putting up good numbers. But for me, at least, answering this question, there are definitively at least 5 or 6 players that I would take in front of him. Like if I'm just like picking players on a team, Giannis, I think, is definitively a better player now than LeBron. I think Luka is. I think Steph is. I think Embiid is. I think Jokic is. I think KD is. You can argue about the durability of some of these guys, and LeBron at his peak is still as good, on a nightly basis as any of them, but consistently over an 82 game regular season, now 69 games left. Those guys definitely have an edge to me over LeBron. You could start making arguments for somebody like Jason Tatum to go in that group. John Morant could go in that group. And none of this is a slam against LeBron. This is a sign of how good everyone, there are a lot of great players in this league, and so
but it's also though a reflection of the reality that LeBron is in decline.
He's come back to the pack. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, that decline is at this level in season 20 at almost age 38. That is a remarkable achievement. I want to make it clear because I've pointed out the inefficiencies with the scoring numbers. The free throws percentage is way down this year as well. Turnovers are a little bit up. Like, none of this is to lose sight of how incredible it is that he can do this at this age. It's a remarkable feat. But the fact that it's remarkable doesn't get you extra credit in the actual games.
Right.
Like in terms of what you need, you don't get any extra points for historical.
And so with AD, then you start asking questions like, who do you start to put ahead on it? Again, it's not peak AD. It's what is, AD on a night in, night out basis. Because again, the numbers kind of looking, AD is interesting to me too, because he's very much, I think, can, like, if you're outside, I'd love to hear what people outside of LA think of the way AD has performed, because maybe they're not quite as critical of it, when you see just kind of the numbers. And he's averaging, 25 points a game, or 24 points a game, I should say. He's averaging over 11 rebounds. He's almost blocking 2 shots a game. He's averaging over a steal a night. He's, I think, 10th in the league in PER, flawed statistic, but again, decent shorthand. Do you put guys like Tatum in there? Gilgeous-Alexander, who's just crushing it right now with OKC. Is Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell's been amazeballs. Like, you start to get into a bunch of guys, and for me, it's not based on, I feel like AD at his peak is better than a lot of them, but I just don't feel like I see it enough. And the pressure on him to perform at an incredibly high level is just stark on this team.
I was going to say, with AD, you get into the extra layer of what he's doing in a vacuum might be really damn good, but needing it to be better because of the dynamic of LeBron in dissension, and where things were supposed to be headed. And I think where the front office absolutely pictured this going by their 4th season together. Like, there was a plan involved with this. If LeBron was still peak LeBron, AD being somewhere between 10 and 15 would be fine. In the same way that Kobe at his peak as a top 5 player, Powell being somewhere 10 to 15 in the league, something like that, was just fine because Kobe was still peak Kobe.
Yeah, the question here, the question I want to save, because I think we'll have to save some of these questions, is, you brought it up, like LeBron's dominance or relative declining dominance impacts what you need from AD, and the answer to the question of what's acceptable from him. The next question becomes, and we don't answer it now, but I'll put it out there for people to think about it, for you to think about it, for me to think about it. Does adding Miles Turner and Buddy Hield fill some of that gap? Does it make it so LeBron's decline is bolstered? Does it make it so Anthony Davis can both be better, potentially, because he's got Miles Turner with him, give him a little more help and all that, doesn't have to do quite as much defensively. And maybe does it elevate Anthony Davis to a place where you need him to be? So, like, these are all really important considerations the Lakers have to make. But what I really love about this question is we are so, we're up to, I would say our hair tops, if we had any, thinking about every little nuance of this. And I wonder, Anthony Davis doesn't score in the 4th quarter. And I am 100% sure that if Giannis or Donovan Mitchell or, Jokic or Luka wasn't scoring in the 4th, they would be talking about it on Locked On Nuggets and Locked On Bucks and Locked On Mavs and all that kind of stuff. But you understand what I'm getting at? Like, we see so much, and it's easy when things are going well to overvalue your players, but it's also easier when things are going bad to just assume that your guys are trash and you're the only team that has these troubles. And I'm struggling with that balance when I try to think about where these guys are, because the rest of the roster is problematic.
But again, the reason that I was even thinking about this question in the first place and, put it out there was just when you start thinking about this from the perspective of supplementing LeBron, because all this is at the end of the day about LeBron. I mean, even more so than with AD. I mean, like, the idea of what you owe LeBron, what you want to give a superstar, particularly if you're the Lakers, who's made their entire branding around superstars and treating them right.
It's what Rob Pelinka talked about in media day. It didn't come up in the same context with AD.
Right. The difference between supplementing LeBron and supporting LeBron, and then the idea of how much support does he actually need, it should at least color the question of how successful do you think you will actually be in doing this, and therefore, is it worth doing? No matter what you think your franchise ethos is, it doesn't change the question of, is this actually worth it on the court or not?
So let's save this for Thursday's show. In addition to any other news that comes out of practice, the Lakers are going to be back on the floor on Thursday, and then to get ready for. I'm sorry, they'll be back out on the floor on Wednesday to get ready, and Thursday to get ready for Friday's game. But let's save this for tomorrow's show. This question of like, if the crowd is correct, because again, the question says clearly, are they top 5/top 10? And I think I agree with the crowd. I think the answer is no. What does that mean?
I agree as well.
And what do they do? Because they're not bad. These are two really good players, but it impacts the answer. So that's that. We'll do that tomorrow. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube, where you can go to see the show, to check everything out, and leave your comments, leave your questions, especially on this question that we're carrying over for another day. And we'll see everybody on Thursday.